On Mother's Day, my daughter-in-law toasted to the old lady taking a nice little vacation in the nursing home. Everyone laughed, even my son, after I'd spent days cooking for them. I simply smiled. But inside, something shattered. They never imagined I'd actually leave. Not for a nursing home, but for a 6-month cruise. Want to hear how I reclaimed my life? Like, share, and let us know where you are listening from. The aroma of slow-roasted chicken and garlic potatoes usually filled my home with warmth and comfort, especially on Mother's Day. This year, it felt like a cruel irony. I'd spent 3 days slaving in the kitchen, meticulously cleaning every surface, arranging fresh flowers, all for this family gathering. My son David and his wife Clarice arrived fashionably late, their 2 children in tow, followed by my sister, Susan, who always brought a store-bought dessert. Bless her heart. We sat around my polished dining table, a relic from my own mother's home, filled with the bounty I had prepared. As dessert was served, Clarice stood, tapping her spoon against her glass. A hush fell over the table. I expected a sweet tribute, perhaps a small acknowledgement of my efforts, or a simple Happy Mother's Day from the heart. Instead, her perfectly manicured hand gestured vaguely in my direction. A glint in her eyes I knew all too well. "I'd like to propose a toast," she announced, her voice a little too sweet. "To the old lady taking a nice little vacation in the nursing home." A ripple of laughter went around the table. My own son, David, chuckled, clinking his glass against hers. My sister, Susan, offered a weak, embarrassed smile, but even she joined in the general merriment. I sat there, a forced, brittle smile plastered on my face, my heart plummeting to my stomach. It wasn't just a joke, it was a carefully aimed dart, dipped in poison, meant to hit its mark. And it did. The warmth in the room suddenly felt suffocating, and the food I had lovingly prepared turned to ash in my mouth. David, ever the peacemaker who always sided with his wife, leaned over and patted my hand. His touch felt utterly dismissive. "Come on, Mom. It's just a joke," he whispered, as if I were a child who didn't understand the complexities of adult humor. His eyes held no sympathy, only a vague impatience. He truly believed it was harmless, a light-hearted jab. He couldn't see the years of sacrifice, the endless love, the literal blood, sweat, and tears that had gone into making him the man he was, culminating in this very meal, this very moment. It hurt more than Clarice's words themselves. It was the complete dismissal of my feelings by the one person I had given everything for. 3 days. 3 long, exhausting days I had spent on my feet. Shopping, cooking, baking, scrubbing this house from top to bottom. My back ached from polishing the antique silver. My hands were raw from kneading dough for homemade rolls. All of it, every single effort, every ounce of love poured into preparing a special day for my family, had been reduced to a setup for a cruel punchline. The humiliation burned, a hot, angry flush creeping up my neck. I managed to maintain my composure, my plastered smile never wavering. But inside, a vital part of me had just shattered into a million pieces. Eventually, the plates were cleared, the children grew restless, and the evening wound down. David, Clarice, and the kids left with hurried goodbyes, promising to call sometime next week. Susan lingered, sensing my distress. But I just smiled and assured her I was fine, gently nudging her out the door. The moment the last car pulled out of the driveway, the silence in my kitchen was deafening, a stark contrast to the earlier laughter. That forced smile finally broke, and angry, bitter tears streamed down my cheeks. They weren't soft, heartbroken tears. These were tears of rage, of betrayal, of a crushing loneliness that had been building for years. For a decade now, ever since Clarice married David, she had been systematically pushing me to the margins. At first, it was subtle. Forgotten invitations, rescheduling family events around her convenience, subtle eye rolls when I offered unsolicited advice. Then it escalated. I became the old lady, the inconvenient grandmother, a burden rather than a beloved matriarch. She made it clear that I was merely a stepping stone, useful for free babysitting or a quick loan, but otherwise to be kept at arm's length. I had raised David alone, working double shifts as a nurse to put food on the table, to ensure he had opportunities I never did. His father had left when David was just a toddler, and it had been just the two of us against the world. Every decision I made, every sacrifice, was for David. And now, this was my reward. I thought of all the times I'd turned down promotions at the hospital because the new hours would interfere with picking up the grandchildren from school. I remembered delaying my retirement, pushing it back year after year, just to help David and Clarice manage their finances when they bought their first home, then their second, then their children's private school tuition. My dreams, my needs, always came last. The thought of a peaceful retirement, of traveling, of simply having time for myself, had become a distant fantasy, always pushed aside for David's family. For my grandchildren, my gaze drifted to a small stack of brochures on the corner of my kitchen counter, tucked beneath an old cookbook. They were relics from a time when I still dared to dream, glossy pages depicting far-off lands, exotic cultures, serene landscapes. I hadn't looked at them in years. Not truly. They were just there, a painful reminder of a life unlived. My hand, still trembling from the residual anger and hurt, reached for the top pamphlet. It was for a 6-month Mediterranean cruise. The cover showed a shimmering azure sea, whitewashed villages clinging to cliffs, and a couple laughing on a deck, champagne glasses in hand. It had always been my ultimate fantasy, an extravagant dream I'd tucked away, deemed impossible. Too expensive, too long, too selfish. It was a fantasy for people who didn't have to worry about anyone else. People who hadn't poured their entire lives into raising a son and then supporting his family. Sitting alone at my kitchen table, the silence now less deafening, more illuminating, a quiet resolve began to settle over me. No more. No more being the convenient grandmother, always on call. No more being the family bank, always willing to bail them out. And absolutely no more being the punchline of someone else's cruel joke. Something shifted inside me that night, a hard, unyielding core forming where once there was only soft compliance. This wasn't just about the toast. It was about reclaiming my life. With a deep breath that felt like the first truly free one I'd taken in years, I picked up my phone. My hands still trembled, but this time it wasn't from anger, but from a mixture of fear and exhilaration. I booked the cruise. A 6-month journey across the Mediterranean. Just for me. The credit card number felt heavy on my tongue, but as the confirmation email dinged, a profound sense of liberation washed over me. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was choosing myself. That night, I slept profoundly, deeper than I had in decades. My dreams were vivid, filled with the salty scent of the sea, the vibrant colors of distant shores, and the joyous, unburdened laughter of a woman who was finally free. The next morning, the sun streamed into my kitchen, making the dust motes dance. My phone buzzed on the counter. David's name flashed across the screen. He was probably calling to ask if I could babysit the kids again, maybe pick them up from school. I let it ring. And ring. Then, I silenced it. Instead, I pulled out a fresh notepad and a pen. It was time to make lists. Packing lists. Itinerary lists. Lists for who to notify, who to ignore. My departure was in 2 weeks. They wanted to joke about sending me away. They never, not in their wildest dreams, imagined I would actually go. And I couldn't wait to see their faces when they found out. The 2 weeks following that unforgettable Mother's Day were a blur of frenetic, yet meticulously quiet, activity. On the surface, I maintained a facade of unwavering normalcy. I continued my usual routines: grocery shopping, watering the garden, attending my book club. My voice remained even. My smile, though still a little fragile, was practiced and convincing. Inside, however, A quiet revolution was taking place. Every ordinary task felt imbued with new meaning, a step in my elaborate escape plan. I was dismantling my old life, brick by emotional brick, preparing for a grand departure that no one, especially not David or Clarice, would ever suspect. My first significant move was a visit to the bank. The fluorescent lights hummed, and the familiar scent of stale paper and disinfectant filled the air. I sat across from Mr. Henderson, a kind, older gentleman who had handled my accounts for years. "Travel plans, Eleanor?" he asked, his brow furrowing slightly as I requested to withdraw a substantial portion of my savings. I gave a vague, non-committal answer about exploring options and seeing a bit of the world before it was too late. He smiled, seemingly satisfied, unaware that I was liquidating my emotional safety net, turning years of carefully guarded funds into a ticket to freedom. The stack of crisp bills in my hand felt heavier than its weight, a tangible symbol of the courage I was trying to embody. Next, I updated my will. It felt morbid, yet entirely necessary. I wanted my affairs in order, a clean slate before venturing into the unknown. And then, the critical step: granting my sister, Susan, limited power of attorney. This was the moment I finally broke my silence. We sat in her cozy living room, cups of lukewarm tea between us. When I laid out my plans, the 6-month Mediterranean cruise, the indefinite departure, her jaw quite literally dropped. Her eyes, usually so full of gentle understanding, widened first with shock, then with a mixture of concern and a spark of something that looked like awe. "6 months, Eleanor? That's a long time," she murmured, her voice laced with worry. "What about David and the kids? They rely on you." I met her gaze steadily, my voice calm, almost detached. "They'll manage. David has Clarice's parents on speed dial for all their needs. They always have, haven't they?" The subtle bitterness in my tone was undeniable, a reflection of how often Clarice's parents had been the preferred choice. Despite my constant availability, it was a cold comfort, but a comfort nonetheless, knowing I wasn't leaving them entirely without support, just without my support. Susan's expression softened as she put the pieces together. "This is about what happened at Mother's Day, isn't it?" she asked, her voice quiet. I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. "That was the final straw, Susan. The very last drop in a bucket that's been overflowing for years. It wasn't just the joke. It was the culmination. The slow disappearing act I've been doing in their lives, fading into the background, becoming less and less relevant, until I was nothing but a convenience, a punchline." The words tumbled out, raw and honest, a truth I hadn't dared to speak aloud until now. The years of feeling invisible, of my sacrifices being taken for granted, of my love being unrequited, it all surfaced in that moment. Susan reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her touch was warm, reassuring. "I understand, Eleanor. Truly. But you can't tell them," I urged, my voice dropping to a near whisper. "Not where I've gone. Not when I'll be back. Not until I'm ready. Promise me, Susan." My timing was crucial. I needed to be the one to dictate the terms of our next encounter, not them. I needed to regain control. She squeezed my hand again, her eyes conveying a depth of understanding and loyalty that brought tears to mine. "I promise, Eleanor. Your secret is safe with me." With Susan as my confidant and ally, the practical matters fell into place with surprising ease. I set up mail forwarding, ensuring my bills would find me, or at least be held until my return. Automatic payments for utilities and mortgage were confirmed. I hired my teenage neighbor, Liam, to mow the lawn and check on the house once a week, promising him a generous sum for his reliability. Packing was a strange, almost surreal experience. I sorted through decades of accumulated belongings, deciding what 6 months on a cruise ship truly required. It wasn't just packing clothes. It was packing a new identity, shedding the skin of the dutiful mother and grandmother, embracing the woman I used to be, Or perhaps the woman I was meant to become. During these 2 weeks, David called twice. Once, to ask if I could babysit for an unexpected evening out Clarice had planned. The second time, he needed to borrow my heavy-duty stand mixer for a charity bake sale Clarice was organizing. Each time I offered a polite, vague excuse, a "can't make it work this time" or a "it's already packed away." Neither he nor Clarice pressed. Neither of them seemed to notice the subtle shift in my tone, the underlying finality in my excuses. They simply accepted it, found another solution, and moved on. It was a painful confirmation of my own invisibility, of how little my absence would truly impact their daily lives. But it was also a validation, solidifying my resolve. They didn't need me as much as they thought, or rather, they didn't appreciate me enough to notice my quiet withdrawal. 3 days before my departure, I paid a visit to my safety deposit box. Inside, nestled in velvet, were my mother's pearls. They weren't particularly valuable in monetary terms, but they held immense sentimental worth. They had been passed down through generations, a tangible link to the strong women who came before me. I held the strand in my hand, its cool weight a comfort, debating whether to leave them behind. Part of me wanted to shed all connections to my past, to travel unburdened. But another part, a deeper, wiser part, knew that some decisions, some severances, could wait until I had healed, until I understood who I was becoming. I decided to take them, a small piece of my heritage, a reminder of enduring strength, with me on my journey. The day before I left, I cleaned my house meticulously. Every surface gleamed, every cushion was plumped, every floor shone. I wasn't entirely sure why. Perhaps it was a final, desperate attempt to prove my worth, to show them, whoever them was, that I was capable, organized, and not the old lady they joked about. Or perhaps it was a ritual, a way of preparing my home for its slumber, a silent promise of return, or a quiet acceptance of whatever contingencies might arise. That night, sleep eluded me. I walked through each room of my house, my footsteps echoing in the silence. I touched familiar objects, the worn armchair where I'd read countless bedtime stories, the framed photographs of a younger David, the kitchen counter where I'd celebrated so many milestones. It was a silent goodbye to a life defined by given love, so much of it, and so little returned. It wasn't bitterness that filled me, but a profound sadness for what might have been, mingled with a surging sense of anticipation for what still could be. My final task was deceptively simple. A brief note, penned on a small index card, affixed to the refrigerator with a magnetic clip. Its words were carefully chosen, concise, devoid of emotion. "I've decided to travel for a while. The house is yours to check on. Don't worry about me. I'll be in touch when I'm ready. Mom." No destination, no return date, no expression of affection, just a statement of intent and a clear boundary. At precisely 9:58 a.m. the next morning, with my single suitcase packed with essentials and my mother's pearls tucked safely away, I locked my front door. The click resonated with finality. I stepped into the waiting taxi, a profound sense of lightness washing over me. As the car pulled away, I glanced at my phone. David was calling again. I silenced it, tucking the phone into my purse. My gaze drifted to the unknown horizon ahead, a new beginning stretching out before me. Unburdened, and entirely my own. The airport was a cacophony of hurried footsteps, loudspeaker announcements, and the low thrum of anticipation. Yet, amidst the chaos, I moved with an almost ethereal calm. Security checks, boarding passes, carry-on luggage, everything flowed with an ease that surprised me. There was no lingering guilt, no gnawing doubt. Just a quiet certainty that I was exactly where I needed to be, doing exactly what I needed to do. My mind was unusually clear, unburdened by the usual anxieties that clung to me like shadows. As I navigated the bustling terminal, I noticed a young mother struggling with a stroller, a bulky diaper bag, and a crying toddler. Her face was flushed, her brow furrowed in exasperation. Without a second thought, I instinctively reached out, grabbing a strap of her overflowing bag and offering a steady hand for the stroller. She looked at me, her eyes wide with gratitude. "I just don't know how I'm going to manage all this," she sighed, her voice teetering on the edge of tears. A gentle smile touched my lips. "You'll figure it out," I told her. My voice surprisingly soft, yet firm. People usually do when they have to. The words, I realized, were as much for her as they were for myself. David and Clarice would have to figure it out now, too. No more convenient grandmother, no more readily available bank. Their safety net had just been packed away for 6 months. A quiet sense of justice, a faint echo of vindication, settled within me. Settling into my window seat, I buckled up, feeling the gentle vibration of the aircraft coming to life. Below, my city stretched out, a sprawling mosaic of familiar streets, houses, and memories. I watched as it gradually shrank, becoming a distant pattern, then finally disappearing entirely beneath a blanket of clouds. As the plane climbed higher, I closed my eyes, allowing myself to truly let go. It was a physical release, a shedding of years of accumulated worry and responsibility. The air pressure shifted in my ears, and with it, a pressure in my soul seemed to equalize. The first 3 days on the cruise ship were a blur of deep, restorative sleep and quiet introspection. My cabin, a luxurious sanctuary with a private balcony overlooking the vast expanse of the ocean, became my haven. I spent hours simply watching the waves, mesmerized by their endless rhythm, the way they crashed and receded, powerful yet calming. I ate meals delivered to my door, read without interruption, and allowed the gentle rocking of the ship to lull me into a state of profound peace. It was a silence I hadn't experienced in decades, a silence not born of loneliness, but of solitude. On the 4th morning, however, the silence was broken by an unwelcome visitor. Guilt. It crept in like a fog, insidious and persistent. What kind of mother abandons her family? The question echoed in my mind, an old familiar refrain that had dictated so many of my past choices. My finger hovered over David's number on my phone, the urge to call, to explain, to apologize, almost overwhelming. Perhaps I had been too hasty. Perhaps I should have just talked to them. But then, an image flashed in my mind. Clarice's triumphant smirk, her eyes glinting with malicious pleasure as she raised her glass. And then, the ripple of laughter, David's included. The way he had dismissed my pain with a casual pat on the hand. The memory was like a cold splash of water, extinguishing the flickering flame of guilt. He had called it just a joke. My hurt, my humiliation, my very existence had been trivialized. How could I go back to that? How could I allow myself to be treated that way again? Each time the guilt resurfaced, I recalled their faces, their laughter, and each time, I slowly, deliberately, put the phone down. On day 5, just as I was considering ordering another solitary meal, a sharp knock interrupted my isolation. I hesitated, then opened the door a crack. It wasn't housekeeping. Standing there was a short, silver-haired woman with sparkling, intelligent eyes and a mischievous grin. She wore a vibrant scarf and held a clipboard. "Eleanor Vance?" she announced, her voice surprisingly robust for her stature. "Beatrice Miller. You've missed 5 activities you signed up for. And I don't like no-shows." I blinked, genuinely confused. "There must be a mistake," I insisted, shaking my head. "I haven't signed up for any activities." The idea of joining organized fun was the antithesis of my current need for solitude. Beatrice's grin only widened. "Oh, but you did, dear. Right here, on the pre-cruise questionnaire. Interested in creative arts. Enjoys learning new skills. Open to social interaction." She tapped a name on her clipboard. "You signed up for my beginner's watercolor class, and my intermediate art history lecture, and my..." Well, you get the idea. She winked. As an honorary cruise director and a fellow passenger, I make it my business to ensure everyone gets the most out of their voyage. And as a retired art teacher, I never miss a chance to recruit a new student. My instinct was to politely decline, to retreat back into the comfortable cocoon of my cabin. But there was something in Beatrice's eyes, a genuine warmth and an unwavering spirit, that stopped me. She embodied a zest for life that I had almost forgotten existed. And then, a clear thought broke through. This is why you came, Eleanor. To rediscover yourself. To step outside your comfort zone. I haven't painted since high school, I confessed, a faint blush creeping up my neck. The memory of clumsy brush strokes and muddy colors flooded my mind. Beatrice clapped her hands together, her eyes twinkling. Perfect. No bad habits to unlearn. Come on, Eleanor. Class starts in 20 minutes. You can borrow my spare set of brushes. Before I could protest further, she had taken my arm, a surprisingly strong grip, and was pulling me gently down the corridor. 90 minutes later, I found myself on the ship's upper deck, the salty breeze caressing my face, a canvas before me, and a palette of vibrant colors waiting to be mixed. Beatrice, ever patient and encouraging, guided me through the basics. I painted the endless blue of the ocean, the dramatic clouds scudding across the sky, the distant hazy outline of a coastline. It was clumsy, imperfect, yet entirely mine. Beatrice peered over my shoulder, her head tilted. Emotional, she mused, her eyes sparkling, and wonderfully unconventional, just what I expected. For the first time in years, I was creating something just for myself, a tangible representation of the turbulent, yet beautiful journey I was embarking on. After the watercolor class, a vibrant blur of blues and greens, and the unexpected joy of creating, Beatrice, with her usual infectious enthusiasm, insisted I join her for lunch. Nonsense, Eleanor. You can't spend another meal alone in your cabin. Come, meet some wonderful women. Before I could voice any polite protest, she had already steered me towards a large table in the bustling main dining room. I found myself seated between Beatrice and a lively woman named Dorothy, across from Florence, Clara, and Abigail. All of us were over 60, all traveling solo, and all, I would soon discover, carried our own silent stories beneath cheerful exteriors. The conversation flowed easily, a comfortable symphony of shared experiences and light-hearted banter. They spoke of past travels, grandchildren, hobbies, and the simple pleasures of life at sea. For the first time in a very long time, I felt truly seen, not as David's mother or the kid's grandmother, but simply as Eleanor. Eventually, Abigail, a gentle woman with wise, crinkled eyes, turned to me. What about you, Eleanor? What brings you on a 6-month voyage? Most people opt for a week or two. Her question was posed with genuine curiosity, not an ounce of prying. I paused, a spoonful of chilled gazpacho halfway to my mouth. I had rehearsed vague answers, platitudes about seeing the world or a much-needed break. But in the warm, accepting company of these women, something shifted. A dam, built up over decades, suddenly cracked. I surprised myself with the honesty that tumbled out. I'm trying to remember who I am, I confessed, my voice a little softer than I intended. When you spend decades being someone's mother, someone's grandmother, sometimes you forget there was a you before all that. You lose yourself in the roles, in the giving, until there's very little left for yourself. As I spoke, I braced myself for polite discomfort, perhaps a quick change of subject. Instead, 5 pairs of eyes met mine with perfect understanding. There was no judgment, no pity, just a profound, shared recognition. It was as if they had all walked a similar path, tasted the same bitter truth. A silent acknowledgement passed between us, a bond forged in unspoken solidarity. Beatrice, ever the catalyst, raised her glass, her eyes sparkling with compassion and a hint of defiance. Well then, she declared, her voice ringing clear. to remembering ourselves, to rediscovering the women we were meant to be, before life decided to assign us other roles. As we all clinked glasses, the chime, a delicate melody in the bustling dining room, something tight and heavy in my chest began to loosen. It wasn't a sudden cure, but a gentle unraveling, a promise of healing. The days that followed settled into a beautiful, unhurried rhythm, entirely my own. Mornings were reserved for painting with Beatrice. Under her patient guidance, my hesitant brushstrokes grew bolder, my colors more vibrant. I found a surprising joy in capturing the shifting moods of the ocean, the intricate details of a blooming hibiscus, or the weathered faces of fellow passengers. Afternoons were for exploring. Whether it was wandering the ship's many decks, discovering hidden lounges, or immersing myself in the rich tapestry of the port cities we visited, evenings were a cherished time for dining with my new friends, sharing stories, laughter, and the easy camaraderie that only develops among kindred spirits. Our first port of call was Naples, a city bursting with life and history. Beatrice and I, with a map in hand and a healthy dose of adventurous spirit, ventured into the labyrinthine streets. We sampled the finest gelato, giggling like schoolgirls as we practiced our terrible Italian, mangling pronunciations and charming the locals with our enthusiasm. Later, we shared a perfect Neapolitan pizza, savoring every bite, our conversation drifting from art to philosophy to the simple joy of living in the moment. Barcelona was a kaleidoscope of color and rhythm. There, I found myself drawn to a small shop filled with flamenco dresses and vibrant scarves. On a whim, encouraged by Florence and Clara, I signed up for a beginner's flamenco lesson. My body, stiff and unaccustomed to such expressive movement, felt awkward at first. But as the music swelled, and the instructor's passionate calls filled the room, something shifted. My feet found a rhythm. My hands began to move with a grace I hadn't known I possessed. I closed my eyes, letting the music move through me, and for a glorious hour, my body remembered joy, a sensual, unadulterated pleasure I hadn't felt in decades. I bought a vibrant red scarf, a tangible reminder of that exhilarating afternoon. In Marseille, I found a quiet cafe overlooking the old port, the air thick with the scent of coffee and the murmur of French voices. I sat for hours, sketching in my new journal, a gift from Beatrice, capturing the bustling scene with tentative, yet increasingly confident, strokes. I wrote too, not just observations but reflections, memories, hopes, giving voice to thoughts and feelings I had suppressed for far too long. It was a form of self-therapy, a way of mapping the contours of my evolving self. As we sailed from the sun-drenched shores of Greece, Beatrice watched me across the deck one morning, her gaze piercing yet kind. "You're different today, Eleanor," she observed, a warm smile gracing her lips. "There's color in your cheeks, light in your eyes. You're blooming." She was right. I felt it, too. The constant knot of tension I'd carried in my shoulders and neck for years, a legacy of unending responsibility, had begun to unravel. The heaviness in my chest, a dull ache that had become my constant companion, had lessened, replaced by a surprising lightness. My steps were springier, my laughter more genuine, my thoughts less clouded. At night, alone in my cabin, as the ship cut through the inky blackness of the ocean, I still checked my phone. It was a habit, a reflex I hadn't entirely broken. Dozens of missed calls from David, his frantic texts piling up like desperate pleas. "Mom, where are you? This isn't funny. Call me. The kids are asking about you. Mom, please. We're worried. Are you punishing me for something?" The messages were a stark reminder of the world I had left behind, a world where my absence had finally, undeniably, made an impact. I read each one, a complex swirl of emotions churning within me, a flicker of triumph, a pang of something akin to pity, and a fierce, unyielding resolve. I wasn't ready. Not yet. I wasn't ready to let their reality intrude on the new self I was discovering. A self who painted, made friends, danced flamenco, laughed freely, and was, slowly but surely, healing. The journey was exhilarating, filled with unexpected turns and blossoming self-discovery. If you're enjoying this story of reclaiming a life, remember to like, share, and subscribe to keep up with Eleanor's incredible journey. About 2 months into the voyage, just as the novelty of new ports and endless horizons had begun to settle into a comfortable familiarity, there was a brisk knock on my cabin door. It was Beatrice, of course, her silver hair shining under the deck lights, a bottle of sparkling wine clutched in one hand and 2 glasses in the other. Her eyes, usually alight with general cheerfulness, were now sparkling with a mischievous excitement. "Special delivery?" she announced, her grin wide. "I thought we should celebrate, Eleanor." I furrowed my brow, genuinely puzzled. "Celebrate what, Beatrice?" Did I finally master the art of painting a convincing cloud? She chuckled, pushing past me into the cabin. "Better than that, my dear. Much, much better." Monsieur Dubois, the ship's art curator, was quite taken with your storm painting, the one you did after that dramatic squall off the coast of Sicily. He's decided to feature it in tomorrow's passenger art exhibition. I stared at her, utterly stunned. My storm painting, a turbulent swirl of grays and blues, punctuated by streaks of almost violent white, a raw depiction of the chaos and beauty I felt inside. "What?" I finally managed to stammer. "That's not possible. I'm just an amateur, Beatrice. A beginner. My work is emotional, as you said." Beatrice set the wine and glasses on the small table, her expression firm yet kind. "An amateur with raw talent, Eleanor. And more importantly, with something to say. That painting of yours? It spoke volumes. It has a power, a depth that many seasoned artists never achieve. It's honest. So, my dear, to new beginnings." She popped the cork with a satisfying thwack and poured us each a glass of bubbly. As we clinked glasses and sipped the surprisingly good Prosecco, a profound realization washed over me. For so long, my identity had been inextricably linked to others. I was David's mother, Clarice's mother-in-law, Emily and Liam's grandmother. I was the nurse, the caregiver, the one who always put others first. But now, in this moment, clinking glasses with a new friend, celebrating a small, unexpected triumph, I felt just Eleanor, not defined by my relationships, not constrained by expectations, but simply myself. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough. More than enough. It was liberating. Meanwhile, back home, 3 months had passed since Mother's Day. 3 months of an unnerving silence from me. David stood in front of my house, the once meticulously manicured lawn now overgrown, weeds creeping through the cracks in the driveway. The rose bushes I tended with such care were wild, untamed. The sight was unsettling. My house, usually a beacon of warmth and order, looked abandoned, almost forlorn. Clarice leaned impatiently on the car horn, her face a mask of annoyance. "Are you going to stand there all day, David? We have to pick up the kids. This is ridiculous. 3 months. No word. We should just call the police." David shook his head, a grimace on his face. "And tell them what, Clarice? That my mother went on vacation without telling us where? They'd laugh us out of the station. She's a grown woman." He knew, deep down, that there was no legal recourse, no cause for alarm beyond his own escalating worry and confusion. "She's just doing this for attention," Clarice scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Trying to make us feel bad for whatever it is she thinks we did." Her voice dripped with disdain, dismissive of any perceived grievance I might have. A flash of irritation, sharp and unexpected, pricked David. He remembered all the times I had put off my own small dreams, my own travel plans, for him, for them. The trips I hadn't taken. the quiet retirement I'd delayed. It suddenly felt like a punch to the gut. He hadn't seen me as Eleanor, the woman with dreams and desires of her own, but only as Mom, the perpetual support system, the endless well of help and resources. His perception had been so narrow, so self-centered. As they finally pulled away from my house and headed home, the chaotic reality of their lives without me hit him afresh. The front door opened to a familiar scene. Dirty dishes piled high in the sink, laundry overflowing from baskets. Emily and Liam sprawled before the television, surrounded by a fort of cushions and discarded snack wrappers. The house, without my periodic help, had become a constant state of disarray. Emily, looking up from her tablet, grumbled, "I wish Grandma was here. She always made the best cookies." Then, with a childlike innocence that cut deep, she added, "Grandma worked full-time, too. She still kept her house nice and made us cookies." Clarice, whose tolerance for household chores was famously low, bristled. "Your grandmother didn't have a real career, Emily," she retorted, her voice sharp. "Being a nurse isn't the same as executive management, darling." David, who had been silently observing the domestic disaster, finally snapped. "Mom was the head nurse of the entire emergency department." "Clarice," he said, his voice unusually strained. "She managed dozens of people, made life and death decisions daily. She just had to raise me alone after Dad died, remember? She put her career second so I could have a chance." The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation. The realization that Clarice had so carelessly diminished my lifelong dedication, my sheer strength, stung him deeply. Clarice threw her hands up in exasperation. "Oh, now you're acting like I'm the villain here. I'm not the one who abandoned this family without a word, David. I'm here, dealing with everything, while your mother is wherever she is." Her voice rose, indignation radiating from her. David couldn't argue with that. She was right. I had left without a word. But the anger in him was mixed with a growing unease, a gnawing suspicion that something fundamental had been building, something he had completely failed to notice, or perhaps willfully ignored. He thought back, trying to pinpoint a moment, a sign. Then, with startling clarity, the memory of Clarice's Mother's Day toast hit him. "To the old lady who's going to take a vacation in a nursing home." He saw my face, my fixed smile. Had it been genuine? Or had it been a carefully constructed mask, hiding a hurt so profound that it had finally driven me away? The image haunted him, a silent question mark hanging over his past blindness. The uneasy feeling that had begun to simmer within David after visiting my house intensified. He felt an urgent, almost desperate, need to call his Aunt Susan again. Clarice, overhearing his muttered intentions, immediately scoffed from the living room. "What's the point, David? She obviously doesn't want to talk to us. And Susan is just as stubborn." But David ignored her, the seed of doubt planted in his mind, growing into a gnawing uncertainty. Later that night, long after Clarice had fallen asleep and the house was finally quiet, David found himself scrolling through old photos on his phone. He paused on a picture from last Christmas, taken in my living room. There I was, standing slightly apart from the boisterous group, holding a plate of cookies I had baked. My lips were curved into a smile, but his gaze now, sharpened by anxiety, saw that it didn't quite reach my eyes. There was a weariness there, a subtle distance he had completely missed at the time. He scrolled further, seeing similar expressions in other photos. Birthdays, holidays, family gatherings. A faint, almost imperceptible sadness lurking behind the forced cheer. Had I always looked like that? Had he just never really looked? The phone in his hand felt heavy. He glanced at the clock. Nearly midnight. But he couldn't wait. He absolutely needed to talk to Susan. He dialed her number, his heart thumping in his chest. Susan answered on the third ring, her voice groggy with sleep, but immediately alert when she heard David's tone. David? Is everything all right? No, Aunt Susan, he said, his voice raspy with emotion. It's not. Mom's been gone for 3 months now, and I'm worried. Clarice thinks she's just trying to get attention, but I don't know. Aunt Susan? I need to know if she's safe. The fear was raw in his voice, overriding any pride or lingering annoyance. A long silence stretched between them, then Susan's sigh, soft but audible. She's safe, David. That's all I can tell you. Relief washed over him, a powerful wave, followed almost immediately by confusion and a fresh surge of frustration. Safe? What do you mean, safe? If she's safe, why won't you tell me where she is? Why won't she call me? His voice rose slightly, the pent-up worry finally breaking through. Because she asked me not to, Susan explained, her voice gentle but unwavering. She needs this time, David. She's earned it. Earned what? He burst out, his patience fraying. To just disappear? To make us worry sick? What did I do, Aunt Susan? What did I do wrong? The question, though raw, was sincere. He truly didn't understand the depth of his transgression. Another pause, then Susan's voice, quiet and deliberate. It's not about one thing, David. It's never about one thing. It's about years of little things adding up. Years of being taken for granted, of being invisible. Invisible? He repeated, bewildered. What are you talking about? Susan took a deep breath. When was the last time you called your mother just to check on her, David? Not to ask for babysitting, or for her to cook a meal, or to borrow money, or for a favor. Just to ask how she was doing? How her day was? When was the last time you saw her as Eleanor, not just as Mom? David opened his mouth, but no words came out. He tried to think, to search his memory, but the answer was a horrifying blank. He couldn't remember a single instance that wasn't tied to some request, some need of his own. The silence stretched, heavy with his unspoken admission. Susan continued, her voice gaining a quiet strength. And Clarice? Well, Clarice has always been difficult with your mother. Remember Thanksgiving 2 years ago, when she insisted your mother's house wasn't special enough for the extended family dinner, and they moved it to a restaurant instead? Or when she suggested your mother dye her hair to look more modern? Or when she helpfully reorganized your mother's entire kitchen, moving everything around without asking? Each example landed like a small, sharp stone in David's gut. He remembered. He remembered all of it. The way my face had subtly tightened when Clarice had dismissed my lovingly prepared Thanksgiving meal, the faint flush of embarrassment when the hair dye comment was made, the quiet despair in my eyes when I discovered my kitchen, my sanctuary, had been invaded and rearranged. And each time, he remembered his own silence. He had stood by, a passive observer, letting these small, cutting cruelties pass unchallenged, prioritizing his peace with Clarice over my dignity. Oh God, he whispered, the realization hitting him with the force of a physical blow. I've been a terrible son. His voice was barely audible, thick with shame and a burgeoning regret. Susan's voice softened, gentle and forgiving. Not terrible, David. Just blind. Blind to her needs, blind to her sacrifices. You allowed yourself to see her only as a role, not as a person, and now your mother is finally doing something for herself, for Eleanor, something she should have done decades ago, but couldn't. Because of you. After hanging up, David sat in the dark kitchen, the faint glow from the streetlights outside illuminating the chaos around him. The dirty dishes, the overflowing laundry, the lingering smell of stale food. It was all a testament to the myriad tasks I had quietly managed for years. Tasks he had never truly noticed, never appreciated. He saw the enormity of my quiet labor, the ceaseless effort that had kept his life, and his family's, running smoothly. For the first time in his life, he saw me clearly. Not as an eternal support system, an unwavering presence always there to catch him. But as a woman who had sacrificed her dreams, her very identity, for decades, a woman whose boundless love had been rewarded, not with gratitude, but with casual disrespect and an insidious invisibility. He understood now, with a clarity that stung his eyes and tightened his throat, what he had lost. Not just my physical presence, not just the convenient help, but something far more precious. My trust, my belief that he valued me, that he truly saw me. Silent tears slid down his face, hot and cleansing, as he whispered into the quiet kitchen. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." 5 months. 5 transformative months since I had locked my front door and stepped into the taxi, leaving behind a life that no longer served me. Now, standing on the ship's deck, the salty breeze whipping through my silver hair, I felt an unfamiliar sense of wholeness. My skin was a rich, sun-kissed tan, a testament to countless hours spent beneath foreign skies. My silver hair, once meticulously styled to appear younger, now flowed freely, catching the sunlight, a beautiful testament to the wisdom and grace of age. I was healed, not entirely perhaps, but deeply enough to know that the woman who had boarded this ship was a ghost of the woman who now stood here. Beatrice, ever the bearer of good news, materialized beside me, her eyes twinkling. "Special delivery for our star artist," she announced, pressing a crisp white envelope into my hand. "They've sold another one of your paintings, Eleanor." Monsieur Dubois is absolutely thrilled. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers, pulling out a substantial check. My breath caught in my throat. Another one. It was astounding. Almost unbelievable. Strangers, people I had never met, valued my art. Saw something in my emotional brushstrokes that resonated with them. I wasn't just Mom or Grandma anymore. I was Eleanor, the painter. The thought settled in my heart, warm and comforting. A recognition of an identity I hadn't known I was capable of cultivating. Beatrice leaned against the railing, her gaze thoughtful. "You know, Eleanor," she began gently, "we dock in New York in 3 weeks. Have you thought about what's next for you?" The question had been swirling in my mind for weeks, a tantalizing whisper of possibility. "I have, actually," I admitted, a shy smile gracing my lips. "I've been thinking about Santa Fe." The name itself felt like a promise. I remembered Isabella, the fiery, passionate gallery owner I'd met in Barcelona, who had been so captivated by my unconventional style, urging me to show her my portfolio should I ever come to New Mexico. "I called her yesterday," I confessed, the words tumbling out with a rush of excitement. "And she still wants to see my portfolio." She even mentioned knowing of a small adobe house, just outside the city, with beautiful northern light for painting. The dream, once a flicker, was now a tangible plan, taking root with exhilarating speed. Beatrice clapped her hands together, her face alight with approval. "That's wonderful, Eleanor. Absolutely wonderful. And brave, too. Have you told your family?" The mention of family brought with it a familiar pang, a faint echo of the old ache, but it was duller now, less sharp, less consuming. Susan's weekly updates, delivered via carefully coded emails, had kept me informed of the unfolding drama back home. I knew about David's struggle, about the house in disarray, about Clarice's increasingly erratic and controlling behavior. Susan had recounted David's calls to her, how they had shifted from panicked accusations to thoughtful, almost reflective questions. He wasn't just asking, "Where is Mom?" He was asking, "What happened? What did I miss? What have I done?" He was finally looking inward, forced to confront the role he had played in my quiet disappearance. The biggest surprise had come a few weeks ago. David had moved out of his shared home with Clarice, taking Emily and Liam with him. The details were vague, but Susan hinted at a climax triggered by Clarice's unreasonable demands and a profound revelation on David's part. "There's something different about him, Eleanor," Susan had written in her last email. "It's like he's finally seeing clearly, finally understanding the true cost of his silence. A part of me, The old, maternal part yearned to reach out, to comfort him, to reassure him. But the newly empowered woman, the artist who had just sold her second painting, knew that I wasn't ready to plunge back into the old dynamics, to risk having my newfound strength eroded by old patterns. I needed time to solidify this new self, to build a life entirely on my own terms, before I could even contemplate re-entering the complex web of my past relationships. "I'll tell them, when I'm settled," I told Beatrice, her knowing gaze understanding my unspoken reservations. "When I have something solid to share, a new foundation laid. When I'm truly ready." That evening, dining with my inseparable circle of friends, Beatrice, Dorothy, Florence, Clara, and Abigail, felt particularly poignant. We laughed, we shared stories, and we reminisced about our adventures. As dessert was served, Abigail raised her glass, her eyes twinkling. "To Eleanor," she announced, her voice filled with genuine affection. "Our resident artist, about to embark on yet another brave new chapter. May your canvas always be vibrant, and your spirit forever free." Later, back in the quiet sanctuary of my cabin, the gentle rocking of the ship a familiar lullaby, I sat down at the small desk. I pulled out my laptop and began to compose an email to David. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, choosing each word with careful deliberation, ensuring it conveyed both reassurance and a firm boundary. "Dear David," I wrote, "I'm well and safe, and I'm truly sorry for the worry I've caused. My disappearance was not a punishment, but a necessary journey of self-discovery. I'm not ready to come home yet. Maybe I never will be. This ship, these new friends, this art, they've helped me find a part of myself I thought was lost forever. But I am ready to start rebuilding our relationship, if that's something you want too. I'm planning to settle in Santa Fe for a while. When I'm there, perhaps you could visit. Just you at first." I pressed send, the click of the button feeling like a definitive declaration of independence. Then, I walked to my easel, where a half-finished canvas awaited. It was a desert landscape, the warm hues of adobe buildings nestled beneath a vast, cerulean sky, the promise of new beginnings taking shape under my eager brush. Santa Fe, my new home, my new chapter. Across the country, David sat alone in his new apartment, surrounded by a maze of moving boxes. The quiet hum of the refrigerator in the unfamiliar space was a stark contrast to the constant clamor of his old life. He traced the rim of a cold coffee mug, reflecting on the tumultuous past few months. The separation from Clarice had been painful, drawn out, and messy, but it had also been profoundly necessary. The final straw had come during a heated argument about their finances, when Clarice's verbal abuse had escalated beyond anything he was willing to subject his children, or himself, to any longer. In that moment, the clarity he had been searching for slammed into him, solidifying his decision to leave with Emily and Liam. A few days after moving into the new apartment, Emily, perched on a stack of boxes, had confessed, her voice small. "It's like we can breathe again, Dad. Mom was always so angry, especially after Grandma left." The words, innocent in their delivery, struck David with the force of a physical blow. The children, his children, had felt the tension, the suffocating atmosphere he had either been too blind or too cowardly to address. He was failing them too, just as he had failed me. His phone chimed, a small, insistent sound that cut through the quiet. A new email notification. He glanced at the sender, and his heart nearly stopped. "Mom." The single word shimmered on the screen, impossibly real. He snatched the phone, his hands trembling. He read the email once, then twice, then a third time, each word soaking into his parched soul. She was safe. She was well. She was willing to see him. Relief, so potent it made his knees weak, flooded through him, followed swiftly by a powerful surge of hope. Tears blurred his vision, hot and unexpected, as months of worry, guilt, and unspoken regret finally broke free. He composed his reply, pouring his heart out onto the digital page, no longer concerned with pride or appearance. "Dear Mom," he typed, "you can't imagine how good it is to hear from you. I've been so worried. You're leaving. It forced me to see so many things. How poorly I treated you. How I allowed Clarice to disrespect you. How I took you completely for granted. I'm so ashamed of the son I've been." He went on to explain about Clarice, about their separation, about the children. "Emily and I have separated. The kids and I moved out last month. It's been hard, but it's for the best. I would love, more than anything, to visit you in Santa Fe. Just tell me when and where, and I'll be there. I hope someday you can forgive me for being so blind for so long." He pressed send. A profound sense of peace settling over him. It wasn't absolution, not yet, but it was a path forward, a glimmer of hope for both of them. 3 months later, I stood in the vibrant, sun-drenched living room of my small adobe house in Santa Fe. The northern light, just as Isabella had promised, flooded the space. Perfect for painting. My first exhibition at Isabella's gallery was just hours away. I gazed at my reflection in a large, antique mirror. The woman looking back at me was still Eleanor, but she was undeniably different. My eyes, once shadowed with resignation, were clearer, brighter, filled with a quiet strength. My silver hair, no longer a source of vanity or self-consciousness, was worn with pride, a crown of lived experience. This was not the Eleanor who had left 9 months ago. That woman was gone, transformed by the sea, by art, by chosen solitude, and by the courage to choose herself. At Isabella's gallery, the evening light cast a warm glow on my paintings, illuminating their rich colors and bold strokes. They lined the walls, a testament to my journey. The turbulent blues of the storm painting, the vibrant reds of Barcelona flamenco, the serene desert landscapes of my new home. Isabella stood beside me, beaming, as she introduced me to various art enthusiasts. Eleanor's work, she enthused to a potential buyer, speaks of authenticity, of raw emotion, of truth. It comes from a place of deep feeling and profound self-discovery. The evening was a blur of success. 7 paintings sold before the night was halfway through, and commissions were offered. Amidst the joyous chaos, Isabella drew me aside. "You know, Eleanor," she said, her eyes twinkling knowingly, "the woman you described to me, the one who walked onto that cruise ship. That woman doesn't exist anymore." I nodded, a soft smile touching my lips. "She doesn't," I agreed. "Because you've seen yourself clearly now," Isabella finished, her gaze warm. "You've embraced all parts of Eleanor. My son arrives tomorrow," I confessed to her, a nervous flutter in my stomach. Despite all my newfound strength, the thought of facing David, of revisiting the echoes of our past, was terrifying. I'm afraid of falling back into old patterns." Isabella squeezed my hand reassuringly. "You won't, my dear. You'll face it as the woman you are now. The woman who painted these." She gestured to the walls, filled with the vibrant evidence of my transformation. The next morning, I sat at a small cafe patio, sipping coffee, the scent of pinyon wood smoke in the crisp Santa Fe air. Then I saw him. David. He was approaching. Not with the confident stride I remembered, but with a more hesitant gait. His shoulders less broad. His eyes less guarded. He looked changed. Less arrogant, more aware. He spotted me, and his face broke into a tentative smile, then a flood of raw emotion. He rushed forward, embracing me fiercely, his arms tightening around me. "Mom," he whispered, his voice thick with tears. "Oh God. Mom, I'm so sorry." We held each other for a long moment, the years of unspoken hurt and regret dissolving in the shared release of tears. We pulled back, composing ourselves, both of us red-eyed but a little lighter. You look amazing, David said, his gaze sweeping over me, a genuine wonder in his eyes. There's something different about you. Something in your eyes. I smiled. A real smile. One that reached my eyes. I feel different, David. More myself than I have in decades. He nodded, taking a deep breath. What happened on Mother's Day? Clarice's toast. It was unforgivable. And my silence. That was unforgivable too. It was just the culmination of years of me allowing you to be disrespected, to be taken for granted. I was blind, Mom. Utterly blind. It wasn't one thing, David, I acknowledged, my voice soft but firm. It was 1,000 tiny cuts, over many years. But you're leaving. It was the wake-up call I needed too. He reached across the table, taking my hand. I know I can't undo it all. I'm not asking for forgiveness yet. I know that will take time, if it ever comes. But I'm just asking for a chance to be part of your new life. To learn, to listen, to try and be a better son. I'd like that, David. I squeezed his hand. My heart full, a sense of quiet hope blossoming within me. We talked for hours, catching up on his separation, his painful but necessary journey into therapy, and my incredible, unexpected voyage of self-discovery. He expressed his pride in me, his voice choked with emotion. For having the courage to choose yourself, Mom. For finding this incredible new life. For showing me what strength really looks like. Later that evening, David came to Isabella's gallery. He walked through the exhibition, pausing before each of my paintings, a look of profound awe on his face. These are incredible, Mom. He breathed, turning to me. This is on another level. I never knew you had this in you. I accepted the compliment, not with false modesty, but with a quiet, earned grace. Standing amidst the vibrant evidence of my transformation, I realized that I had not just found a new life, but a new self. I had found my true harbor, a place within myself that no storm, no matter how fierce, could ever disturb again.